it would probably be cheaper.
And less headache for you. You know.
Yeah. I always wondered about that stuff. I just picture walking into the whole building. It looks like just a big layer of frosting on every single surface.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. Even if you care a little bit, this is the show for you. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Senior Editor Mark Peterson.
Hi there.
Builder and regular podcast guest Ian Schwant.
How you doing, Patrick?
Good to see you, Ian. And our longtime producer, Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Please, you can find, please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it is a pleasure to see you guys this morning. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Good to see you.
What do you guys want to talk about? We're kind of short on listener feedback, and I'm going to say because we've recorded a number of shows this week in preparation for the holiday season, so we're jamming them all together on the recording end, so we haven't had time to get feedback. But Ian, you had a conversation via email with me. I don't know if Mark was privy to this, but
no.
You were pointing out that Instagram can be an angry place for builders.
Yeah. So many of the builders that I follow on there, and I'm sure they're the same people that everybody that listens to this podcast follows, the bulk of them do really high level premium builder work. And I've just been noticing so much more of these Instagram builders posting photos, kind of like what we talked about last time I was on the podcast with your little stucco repair and the bad framing behind it.
Yeah.
Just really kind of ripping on the basic, almost like commodity style homes and some of the details that you see in them that are oftentimes poorly executed. And a lot of it's on your McMansion-y type homes that in some respect look like they should be a premium home, like what a lot of custom builders do, but they're built under a totally different economic model, usually with lower experienced builders, and then even times poorly designed building systems, a lot of like hip trusses that never go together well. So that was the basics of what I was ranting to you about.
Yeah. What do you think the problem with this is? Shouldn't we be calling out bad construction or bad practice?
Yeah. The thing is, there's more than one way to do it, and it's a shame too, because a lot of these folks who are showing, they basically, they want people to get their name out there or whatever, but a lot of them just want to show people, to share what they're doing, to share their techniques, to share their methods. And it's one thing to disagree with somebody. So let's say, Ian, I see a post from your company and you're doing something differently. There's two things I can do. I can call you an idiot and call your company a hack, or I could just say, hey, that's interesting. Down here, we do it this way. I mean, why? It just doesn't seem like it's that hard not to be an asshole,
Yeah.
I find it very difficult.
Mark.
I think folks would.
Yeah, well, Patrick, you're an exception.
No, I agree with that, Mark. And, the analogy that I had, I don't know if I threw this to Patrick or not, but I did to a couple other of my friends, was it's like a 3-star Michelin chef going through the drive-thru at McDonald's and then doing a post about how the Big Mac doesn't meet the standard of their 3 Michelin star restaurant. We do have a problem with not enough affordable housing for people. And, that affordable housing is never going to get built by the cream of the crop builders on Instagram. So for the amount of stuff I've been seeing lately of some of these people taking commodity home building to task, I just, like you said, Mark, there's better ways to do it.
And a lot of these processes that the really high-end builders use, they eventually, the materials become cheaper, manufacturers see an opportunity, and more people maybe start manufacturing different or better products. And that's a healthy exchange between high-end builders and, builders of affordable housing is helpful. But if you get, if people are so gun shy, they just don't want to say anything anymore without getting, taken to task and called names. That's just not, it doesn't do anybody any good. It's just not, it's a bad deal.
And to your point, the higher end of our builder market ends up being where a lot of this stuff gets R&D'd anyway.
Yes.
To talk about like even the car world, your higher end racing leagues, that's where hybrid car technology came from. It's where people are throwing just stupid amounts of money at things, usually with no budget or no care for a budget or time. And from that, you get all of these different methods that start to percolate down to your one-man remodeler with a station wagon.
And if something goes horribly wrong, usually those high-end companies can afford to fix it.
Yeah, and so can their clients.
Yeah,
Right.
I've talked to a builder. It was a nationwide builder who had built it, like an old folks' home in our town, a senior living. And this is when I was on the planning commission. I asked him if he had used, and I think I've mentioned the story before. I asked him if he had used any kind of cutting edge or new technology. He said, "Are you kidding? I don't." I said, "We wait until other people figure out the flaws before we start doing that, especially on scale like that."
Yeah, there's a good reason for that. Like, stuff does go wrong. We've heard about building failures, interseal siding, and other things. It's like it's risky to try something new.
So, but kudos to the people who are, and hopefully like we mentioned, hopefully they keep sharing on Instagram and other social networks.
I would say be nice, people.
Yeah, be nice. What the heck? Don't be like Patrick.
Don't be like me. It's funny, social media has made it so easy for everyone to be an armchair quarterback or builder. And it's like, I don't know, it's frustrating to me because people are generally trying to do a good job. They're not, and if there's sacrifices made, it's because there are limitations on budget and time and any number of things, right?
Yeah, and I've had a lot of interesting experiences with the Fine Homebuilding house stuff that I did, and I have the personality to try and interact with people that send me messages, whether it's through the Fine Homebuilding website or through my Instagram on it. And it's been interesting that when you interact with some people, the whole dynamic changes of them just trying to point out that you did something stupid.
So you're saying that they come off with both barrels blazing, but then kind of calm down after you talk to them.
When you send them something back and go, "Hey, this is why I did it. Your way makes sense too." Like Mark was saying, you're in different parts of the country, you do things differently.
And I do like it when somebody has a snide comment or a sarcastic remark, and the followers of whoever was posting that post come and defend that person. I think that's an important part of it. But yeah, we should. I mean, not everybody should. There's more than one ways to do it, and there's probably the best way to do it. But you'll never get to the best way by just criticizing all the time. Be nice.
I think that might be the best early part of the show we've ever done.
Wow.
I know, right? So this comes from Dianna from Champaign, Illinois, which is where Bill Rose is home stomping ground is, right? Researcher of building science, now retired. Hello, FHB podcast crew. My husband and I are building a house, and we're wondering if you know an effective yet economical way to soundproof interior walls. We have 3 young kids and are hoping to keep the bedrooms quiet, both for the kids and because of them. So the short answer is, Dianna, affordable, effective soundproofing seems kind of mutually exclusive from what I've seen with regard to assemblies. But maybe you guys have some suggestions on how to keep this work reasonably affordable.
So in the past, all I've done is just basically fiberglass insulation and maybe even a sound barrier, because sometimes you can get the sound version of it cheaper than the regular insulation in between the walls. But it's been a while since I've done that, and it didn't seem all that. It helped.
It's not all that effective. It's a few decibels. What were you going to say, Ian?
So our standard assembly that we do at TDS is resilient channel with the mineral wool soundproofing or dense pack. The dense pack is a little bit more expensive, but it basically works out to about $250 a square foot. And then where I've found that people go wrong in trying to create these soundproof rooms is they don't think about the ceiling and the floor. So you have to also do it to the ceiling of the room and the floor of the room. So if you're on the second floor, you've got to do something on the first floor below. If you're on the first floor, you have to do something to the basement. And I would recommend that they just Google STC ratings, which is the sound transmission class ratings for assemblies. There's a lot of really good information, some of it on the really nutty end of trying to build a recording studio. And then you can find out what the STC ratings are for all the various materials and assemblies. But there's a lot of good information out there on it.
I've never used the channels. What do they look like? How do they work?
So they call them hat channels because from the side profile, they look like your kind of classic Abe Lincoln top hat. Yep. And those get attached to your studs on one of the flanges, and then you attach the drywall to the top of the hat. And then that breaks the vibration path from going through the drywall, through your studs, and then out the other side.
Have you noticed any difference of which is worse as far as a floor assembly? Is a TJI or a engineered trusses? Have you noticed one's worse or better than another?
No, and at TDS, most of our homes are older homes in the Madison area, so they just, they have either a timber joist system if they're an older home. Otherwise, they have 2x8s or 2x10s. But we'll typically do the resilient channel and then dense pack cellulose.
And how much is the channel? I mean, so is that something? I'm assuming it's just like a strip of rubber, hard, whatever, something.
It's metal, actually.
It's
is
steel.
It really? Why would
it's steel?
That's odd.
It comes from the commercial steel stud industry. So
you think steel would transfer the?
But it's very small
vibrations.
in cross section, which
Right.
helps greatly.
Oh, so the size of the contact is just smaller.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah, you end
that's
up with
interesting.
just a size of contact of like a ½ inch by the width of your stud face.
So do you have to hit these things through when you're screwing to the studs? You got to use longer screws, I would imagine.
No,
But
No,
you-
then the
would go through
drywall gets fastened to the resilient channel. It's not fastened to the framing member.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
you would-
So then, so you
you'd
got to be careful
fasten-
you got to be careful when you're installing this that you're hitting that channel the whole way.
Yeah, it ends up being pretty easy because the top hat part of the channel is like 1.5 inches. So it's just like hitting a stud on its
Okay,
side.
interesting. I see. Gotcha.
But they started using them a lot in commercial work, and often when I demoed hospitals or schools, you'd find it instead of being screwed to a metal joist system for like a gym or something like that, you'd find it tie wired and hanging off of the metal ceiling
so
joists.
Wow.
are steel studs any better than wood studs, or are they worse? Or don't you?
I think steel studs are worse, but it's such a hard road to hoe trying to get people to use steel studs in residential situations. I think they're great for a lot of interior wall applications. And I think during the last year, they might have even been cheaper for a while.
For a while, they got close because I was keeping an eye on them. So to answer Diana's question, what is a
Can
good...
I talk, Mark?
No, I'm sorry. Yes. Too much coffee this morning.
So years ago, I did a story with Bonnie Schnitta, who's an acoustician, a PhD, and her company SoundSense. And I learned from her that sound moves two ways. It either moves through the structure, which is a great way to deal with that noise is with the resilient channel, or other ways to decouple the interior wall. So it's not moving out of the space, it's isolated, right? And then the other way it moves is through sound. So when you have like back-to-back receptacles or back-to-back ducts on an interior partition wall, that is the worst situation because that sound goes right from one room to the other. So I would say inexpensively, that's an easy thing to do, is to keep receptacles in different stud bays, not in the same one. And if you can put ductwork so it's not connecting to spaces, it is the best transmitter of sound because it's metal, and it's if you tap on a duct, you could hear it miles away, right?
Yeah.
So it's similarly in the house. The expensive way is with mass-loaded vinyl, and we've talked about that on the show many times, and that's getting into what Ian was talking about with recording studios. This stuff looks like vinyl flooring, except it's loaded with heavy particles that make it resistant to sound's transmission, and its flexible nature helps with that too. So, like Ian said, I would suggest that you figure out what you're trying to do with regard to how much sound you want to reduce, and then figure out an assembly that fits within your budget and it is buildable in your structure.
Ian, so when you're doing soundproofing, are you just doing it between public areas and like bedrooms, or is it just standard fare to just all the interior walls?
We're finishing up a basement renovation at a house in Madison right now, where they have some like giant 80-inch TV, and they're going to do, movies and things like that down there. But they also have a spare bedroom for one of their parents down there. So they really were conscious about getting the soundproofing right. So we ended up doing that just inside their movie room space.
What was that assembly, Ian?
And that was the resilient channel with blown dense pack cellulose.
One thing I know that doesn't work very well is this closed cell foam insulation.
That's surprising to me because it would stop air, but that's only one way sound moves, right?
Yeah, I was at a house once where I think the owner owned a little side business of a spray foam company, and it was a huge house, and he spray foamed like 2-3 inches underneath, from the basement ceiling or underneath the floor on the main level. Just sprayed the whole thing with foam, and it literally did almost nothing.
Mm-hmm.
He was very disappointed.
Yeah, Dianna, I don't know if that's helpful, but I would say, try and minimize penetrations between, your kids' rooms and spaces you want to be quiet, or either your own living space, bedroom, or, the shared living space. And, think about how hard you want to go to this. I think you mentioned, Mark, fiberglass bats in regular stud construction, and that helps very little. If you look at those STC charts, it takes a decibel or two off because you're mitigating the drum effect of two sides of drywall, which actually tends to amplify the noise coming from the other side of the room. And that helps break up those sound waves, but it doesn't really do very much. But that is, like, when you hear people talking about soundproofing methods, that's one that folks often talk about.
Yeah, and I've done it several times it certainly helped, but it wasn't nearly the effects that I was looking for. I did hear that rock wool does work better than just your standard fiberglass.
I bet it does, because it's denser than fiberglass, and that's, density is helpful.
Yeah, and they make a specific product for it. I think it's called Safe and Sound. It doesn't carry an R value, so it's just a super dense mineral wool product.
It's a great question, Dianna. Thanks for writing in. Maybe other folks who've dealt with this problem will write in and tell us what they did in their residential projects. The trying to keep the parents' room separate from the theater room, Ian, sounds like a tall order. I wonder, how did that work ultimately?
They're doing trim work on it now, so it's not in service yet, but I actually stopped and took a look at the job yesterday, and it's turning out pretty cool. So
the thing with those is, like, most of them have a subwoofer, and that is very difficult to isolate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I can hear the people who have them in their cars driving by my house before the car gets there.
It's half a mile away.
Yeah.
Yeah, the low frequency travels further. The other weird thing about that soundproofing, it's hard to know how well it worked because you have nothing to compare it against.
Unless
So
it's
if
remediation,
if a customer complains like, "Hey, I can still hear noises over there," it's like, well, but you don't. It would have been a lot worse had we not done these things.
Right.
So it's kind of a challenge.
That's a fascinating field, I would say. This one comes from Ray. Hey, Patrick and gang, I'm in the process of building a cabin in northern Wisconsin using pretty standard construction methods: 2x6 framing, fiberglass bats in the walls, and blown-in cellulose in the attic. I plan on installing a wood-burning stove to use as an auxiliary heat source. The stovepipe that passes through the ceiling into the attic and out through the roof will be insulated. The pipe needs 2 inches of clearance from combustibles, so I'm sure it doesn't get super hot, but I'm guessing that it does heat up quite a bit. My question is, should I create an insulated chase in the attic to prevent it from heating up that space? The pitch of the roof is steep, so there's going to be quite a long length of exposed hot pipe running through it. My concern is that the warm air in the cold attic will cause condensation to build up in the form of frost and ice on the cold surfaces, like the truss framing and underside of the roof sheathing. The fireplace folks say it's not necessary, but it seems like cheap insurance to me. Thoughts? Love the show. Ray. Well, who wants to go first?
Well, this is perfect for me because I have to do the same thing. So I don't know what the answer is. Ian, what have you guys done a lot of? I mean,
You said it was perfect for you, but then you didn't have any answer.
Well, it's perfect for me because I don't have the answer. So I'm hoping one of you two are going to have the exact answer, and I can follow that advice.
I've seen people do exactly what Ray's talking about, where they build a chase and then send the double wall metal pipe. I can't remember the name. Is it metal bestis or something like that pipe?
Yeah. It used to be asbestos.
Through the chase. Right? Yeah. I would say this would be a great application for like the rock wool comfort board or any type of mineral wool board to use on the inside of that chase, since it's going to be naturally heat tolerant, and it would give them, I think it's like R8 is one layer of the easily available comfort board. You just have to come up with some plywood box to wrap that in, because I think you'd want to make sure that you don't get any moisture going through the insulation, right, Patrick? That could still get into your chase.
I'm going to say that this is unnecessary. Like the metal pipe is meant to be left exposed in an attic. These are like tested products. And, I would worry if you start deviating from what the manufacturer says that you're going to get yourself in trouble. And admittedly, people put these on the outside of a house in a chase similarly. And, but like, why worry about it?
You just don't want to spend the money.
And it seems like a huge hassle. Like,
but you don't want your house, if it's 10 below outside and those pipes, they still have to get hot. There's no way that they're cool in the attic. You're cranking a lot of, we talk all the time about sealing up those spaces so the heat from the house doesn't get up, around chimneys, and sealing up all those air gaps so the heat doesn't get into the attic and cause condensation. Well, here you're pumping in tons of B2Us in the attic. But
through that pipe.
I guess. Yeah, through the pipe. It's a heat source up there. The other question.
What's the worry with that, though? What is the problem that's going to be created? It's not a condensing surface. It's hot.
No, but the condensing surface would be the decking and the framing members, like Ray said. If that heat rises, hits that cold decking, it's going to condense. That warm air is going to condense on that decking and turn into frost. And when the roof decking warms up on a hot sunny day, that frost is going to turn into water and start dripping back down into the ceiling.
So your worry is that this hot chimney is sucking a bunch of interior air up on its interior between the two layers of steel piping and gonna get air into the attic?
No, it's heating up the air that's already in the attic, and that warm air is hitting cold surfaces and condensing.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So. Has anyone seen this effect? It seems a little theoretical, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, I've seen the effect of warm air coming out from the house and condensing on the underside
and making
deckings.
Frosty sheathing. Yeah.
Oh, I've seen an inch and a half of thick of frost up there.
Are you thinking, Patrick, that as long as he's ventilating the roof assembly, it's not something that's worth worrying about?
Yeah, I am saying that. And like the exterior of the pipe, I'm sure is warmer than the ambient temperature in the attic space, but like there are gazillions of these things in service out there similarly, and I have not heard this problem. So that's what I'm going by.
Patrick says don't spend the money.
Don't spend the money. I wonder about how it would affect the draft of the draft of like getting a fire, because if it's a long enough pipe, sometimes getting a fire started in the first place is tough, because I wonder if that would make it better or worse.
My guess is it would make it the same, because it's going to be, the flue is to the outside, so it's going to be the ambient temperature, and heat is going to move through steel piping very readily. This calls for some science. You're gonna do this, Mark, and report back to us on your new build?
Yes, I will. Yes, I will.
You're thinking this is a valuable thing, it seems like.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah?
But I guess I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it if it's 100% just unnecessary. I mean, like you said, I don't want to spend money that's not, that I don't have to.
Yeah.
But,
what do you think, Ian?
Yeah, I don't know. You convinced me not to spend the money.
Jeff, do you have thought?
I think your point that if you're ventilating that space, it's likely unnecessary.
Jeff, what do you think about this?
I tend to agree that it's not necessary because it's warm, but it's not, there's not a whole lot of heat. It's more, a couple of 100-watt light bulbs. It's not a fireplace.
Yeah. And the whole idea of the thing is it's meant to keep that outside layer of the double layer flue pipe cool, because it's, as he pointed out, 2 inches to combustible. So it can't be getting very hot.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, maybe that's it. It'd be interesting to see how hot those things do get on the outside.
I think warm to the touch, but it's not going to burn your hand. So It's 110 degrees, something like that.
Boy, that sounds like some pretty specific measurements there, Jeff. Where'd you come up with that?
It's a thing my dad used to do for measuring the heat and resistors and things like that. It's like, okay, that's about it.
Interesting.
That is funny.
Once again, Ray, great question. Maybe other folks have some experience with this who listen to the show, or I would say the safest thing to do is do what the manufacturer of your flue pipe says to do. And I would say that's generally a good thing to do, is do what the manufacturer says, because these things are all tested. They have a UNL label.
Right.
They're not testing for moisture accumulation in your attic, but they are testing for safety. And when you deviate from what they do, who knows what the other effects are going to be.
Right.
Oh, here's someone from your stomping ground, Mark. This is Michael in Kentucky. Hey, dear podcast crew, I enjoy listening to your weekly podcast and to the others that you all produce as well. Now it's my turn to ask a question. I'm building a standalone workshop that is 24 by 32. It is on a slab in which I've installed PEX tubing for a Radient floor heating system. I have 10-foot walls and a truss roof system that is 24 inches on center and pitched at 10-12. I've not yet decided if you want to put a ceiling in or leave it open to the attic space for storage of material. If I leave it open, what are my insulation options? If I put a ceiling in, what are my options? I plan on putting on metal roofing. Should I be worried about moisture buildup? How should it be vented? I've already put 6-inch blocking between all the trusses, which effectively blocks ventilation through there. Here are some pictures. I'm pretty sure that I live pretty close to Mark in central Kentucky. Perhaps he can come over and insulate for me.
Yeah, the answer to that question is a definite no. But I saw the pictures, and yeah, it looks, that's my backyard. That's it. Horse fences, that's a dead giveaway.
Michael closes by saying, thanks for all you do to keep the craft alive, Michael. Well, thanks, Michael. What do you guys think?
Well, you're sitting in a similar structure right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I insulated it very wackily, though. I wouldn't tell people to do what I did. I have cut and cobble in my in my sloping ceilings, and only because I had like a unit of leftover insulation from the walls when I bought my recycled polyiso. I ordered 1 pallet, and they sent 2, which was fine. So don't do that. It's too labor intensive, and it probably doesn't work as well as I thought it would. I like insulating the ceiling and storing stuff somewhere else, like a vented attic with a big layer of cellulose on the ceiling. It seems like a super time-tested and effective strategy for insulating any space.
That's exactly what I wrote down.
Yeah. There's a few things well, it sounded like he blocked up in between the roof trusses. So if he does, he's going to have to, remove the top part of those blocks or remove them altogether if he's going to insulate the attic. So that's one thing to consider. And
you
then
mean at the sheathing level, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So you need air flowing up through the soffits, up and out either the peak or some vents towards the top. So you can't block up those spaces in between the trusses. And I agree with both of you. The other reason is just the sound from the rain. And I don't know if it's a big deal, if it's just a workshop or it doesn't matter. How noisy is your place in the rain, Patrick?
It's really quiet, actually, Mark, because I have solid sheathing and asphalt shingles, right?
Yep, that makes a huge difference. So if he's doing tin, which I think, did he say he was doing? Actually, he didn't. Maybe he didn't say.
He did say he was
just
putting
said
metal,
metal
roof on.
roofing. Yeah, metal roofing. So I know I'm in a metal roof right now, and the builder of this place sprayed about 2 inches of foam right up. There's purlins across, and so there's no sheathing. There's purlins, and he sprayed about 2 inches of foam, and it is flipping loud in here when it rains. So if it's a workshop, not a consideration. But and I've had metal buildings before, and if you do OSB and then the metal, makes it much more quiet. And then if you insulate the attic with some blown cellulose or fiberglass, it's the same as a house. So I don't know if that noise matters, but it's something to think about. Oh, the other thing I wrote down was I just talked to an insulating contractor yesterday. He gave me a bid earlier, and he was doing a neighbor's house, and he stopped by and he said he can't get the chemicals that make closed cell insulation until after January.
What?
Yeah. So
we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the show, right, Ian? About shortages of stuff and So how did you learn about this, Mark?
He just came because he was going to give me a bid on my walls. I plan on doing 2 inches of closed cell, and then for sound, I'm going to put in an R whatever, like an R11 or R13 over the top of that.
So you're doing in your walls what we describe as a flash and bat. You have a thin layer of closed cell foam for vapor control and air sealing, and then you have fluffy insulation for the rest of your thermal boundary.
Yeah, and here climate's pretty mild, so it's not even so much the R, but it's the combination of the R and the sound dampening effects of it. So he was going to give me a bid, and I hadn't heard from him for a week or so, and then he was in the neighborhood and stopped by and said, I can't get the stuff till January. So
is that going to slow you up, or are you going to do something else?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. There's other people that do it in the areas, but a lot of times, as we'll talk about, it's if one contractor's struggling to get supplies, probably everyone in the area is. So I don't know the answer to that. He's got closed cell, or he's got open cell rather. I just don't know. I'd have to do a little more research on it, I guess. It's
Skip
cheaper,
the foam.
but there's that too. It's cheaper to do the open cell per inch, but if you actually figure it out per R value, it's not that much difference. It's very similar.
And I don't know if it works for the vapor controls part of what you're doing, and that's potentially risky, right? Especially in your hot climate and the cooling season.
I think it does over 3 or 3.5 inches. I think it might count as a barrier, but I don't know. I've got more research. I just heard this yesterday, so that's a surprise to me.
Yeah, our insulator has told us that he can't get the greener chemicals for spray foam. I know that's an oxymoron, but so he's got until January, he's got to use whatever he can get. So it could be a chemical preference that installer has to use that they can't get.
Do you have one? Sorry, Patrick. Do you have one particular installer that you use, or do you bid it out for every?
We have one insulation installer that we use for everything.
I'm going to say, Mark, to you, skip your foam layer, and when your building is done, AeroBarrier it. If you can find one of those folks, I know folks that are doing new builds now. That's their go-to AeroSeal.
And I think it costs
AeroBarrier.
about $1.50 a square foot, which that's really not that bad.
Yeah, and you get a guaranteed number at the end of it, which I don't know that you get any other way.
So you're talking put regular old fiberglass or rock wool in the cavities and air bury it. It would probably be cheaper
and less headache for you. You know.
Yeah, I always wondered about that stuff. I just picture walking into the whole building, it looks like just a big layer of frosting on every single surface. Have you done that, Ian? Have you worked with that stuff before?
I haven't worked with it before. The net zero insulation class that I took at Yestermorrow in Vermont, one of the guys that teaches the class is a big AeroBarrier proponent, and he had a bunch of really interesting videos of using it in old timber frame structures in Vermont. And he had pictures of, like what you said, frosting filling in all the little voids and the timber frame members. It was kind of interesting, but you wonder what the long-term lifespan of that is.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
That is a good point. And they've done accelerated testing, and they say it's going to hold up, but we don't know that, right? Your point, Mark, is like, I did this for a Fine Homebuilding story, and when you go in the building after it's done, the floor is sticky, but you really can't tell. It's
not that bad. So it's not every single wall. So I wouldn't have to brush every wall before I paint or anything like that.
So the worry or the problem potentially is like where it exits the blower door that forces the sealant into the little gaps and cracks, right? They use a blower door at 100 pascals, and it if there's like an adjacent wall near the door, it'll accumulate on that. But anywhere else, it's moving out the cracks and settling on the floor and seemingly not going anywhere else.
Sweeping the floor I wouldn't mind, but brushing down every surface before painting would be a pain.
I don't think that's necessary. And, like they do have to seal up all the windows and exterior doors because the sealant is trying to leak out the sides of your double hung windows, right? And then when you go to open it, when the job is done, it won't open. So you have to make sure you seal all that stuff up. Yep. And then you also have to artificially tighten it up because when you pull the plastic off the doors and windows at the end, they're going to have a certain amount of leakage that was not reflected in the sealing process. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So you have to do more sealing to compensate for the leaky windows and doors that are going to be exposed at the end of the process.
Yeah, something I didn't even occur to me. I'll have to look into that.
The question is whether you're going to be able to find a dealer in Kentucky, but the company is headquartered, I want to say, in Dayton, Ohio, which is probably not that far from you.
Yeah, I'm about an hour and a half, 2 hours from Cincinnati. So, and an hour from Lexington, or less than an hour from Lexington. So I would think Lexington would have somebody that does it, maybe.
If you ask
them, it's a franchise deal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would think you're close enough to the home office. There's got to be somebody close by.
You might become a dealer, Mark. Who the heck knows? You're going to have to buy your own rig and start doing that for people.
Yeah.
Or a training site.
Yeah, right?
Oh, yeah. There you go. Maybe I get a discount.
Maybe they're listening. Folks have heard me say it on the show before. It seems like the most promising building technology I've seen in many years doing this. And folks say I'm a shill for them. I am not. I just like science, and this seems to be a good use of technology.
And it actually has a long-standing use for sealing ductwork.
Yeah,
that's where it came from. And somebody decided to scale it up to seal an entire house, from what I know of it.
My understanding, it was a Department of Energy grant that allowed them to develop this program, which is kind of cool. The problem with ductwork is that often leaky ductwork is not the only problem. Ductwork is often badly designed and undersized, so it doesn't solve that problem. So it doesn't often work in bad duct situations.
Did you insulate your ducts at your house, Ian?
So the only ductwork I have is for my HRV, and I did not.
Oh, you're slab on grade, aren't you?
Yeah, and then it's the Mitsubishi wall units and in-floor heat. Patrick's favorite in-floor radiant heat in a high-performance house.
Do you ever use it? It's not even really winter yet. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we've come up with is we put in the programmable thermostats. So like in our basement where our bedrooms are, it comes on for about an hour a day, no matter what, just to take the chill out of the slab, is what we've found makes it the most comfortable. And then we have a version of that we have set to schedule upstairs.
Does it make the space uncomfortably hot while the floor is getting No,
because one of the things that I did when I laid out the tubing in the floor was I did the BTU counts for the amount of tubing that I was putting in. So I ended up putting in about maybe 2/3 of what you would normally put in and created a lower BTU slab.
That's smart. Well, this is our next part of the show is something that everyone who's building homes is dealing with presently. And this is a genesis of you, Ian. You've reached out to your trade subcontractors and asked them what's going on with regard to supply chain shortages and labor costs and labor availability. And you heard back from your folks with great answers.
Yeah, it seemed like everybody was just waiting for somebody to ask them about that.
Yeah, it did seem that.
I was really surprised by the candid responses that I got from a lot of our standard trade partners that we use at TDS. But it really all started that our cabinet company that we buy all of our kitchen cabinets and that from for our jobs last week sent us that we're getting a 6.5% increase in, I think, mid-January. And they had a couple of increases already. I think there were maybe 3-4% increases throughout 2021. And then there was some unavailability of, I think, maple plywood for a while. And then Marvin Windows sent out something that it was going up 7%, like, tomorrow. So order anything that you don't want to go up. And, that was what really got me. I think I emailed that one to you, Patrick, and
yes,
then sent something similar out to everybody else that we do work with and got a lot of stuff back. I think the one that you thought was interesting, Patrick, was our electrician talked about a shortage in meter sockets, that they can't even find them on eBay, and they're down to like their last 3 that they have. So, and a common feature of the homes in Madison that we work on is that we have to upgrade the service to 200 amps. A lot of homes in Madison have the meter is in the basement, and the local utility wants to get all of those out of the basement, easily readable and accessible by their techs. And to think about they're down to their last 3 is quite surprising. And they've done that, I think, on 3 or 4 projects for us just this year, moving the meters outside.
What do you, so what I don't know about economics is everything, but it seems like when one person says they're going to raise prices, it seems to like raise the gate for everybody else too. They're like, oh, it's okay, we can do this. And I wonder if it's profitability or if it's true material cost. Do you guys have any sense of what's going on?
One of the things that our main HVAC contractor told me when I spoke to him, and he's the owner of the HVAC company, and they've grown, I think he said they're growing at like 18 to 20% every year. But he said that his financial advisors are telling him that where it looks like on paper that you're growing at that 18%, when you have 7% inflation like we have now, you're really growing at a fraction of what you think you are because of how much you're losing to your increased labor cost and increased costs in your cost of goods.
I've talked with some manufacturers and building manufacturers specifically, and one of the things that was kind of common in a very stable economy is they would raise prices right at the beginning, right around the first of the year, because all of the bigger builders in the northern climates, if it's insulation or windows or whatever, they would buy a whole bunch. And typically that's a slow time for manufacturers. So actually raising prices would cause a little glut so they can actually have more work to do in the January and February's. So that it kind of evened it out. But I've also talked nowadays, some of the motivation is cost and supply. A lot of it is cost and supplies that the materials and labor that goes into their products. But the other thing is lead times. And the worst thing a customer can do, or worst thing a manufacturer can do, is not get a product to a customer in time. They would rather lose a customer to higher prices than not be able to get them their products when they need it, because then you've lost that person for life. But if the prices go up and they say, oh, we have to use somebody else or whatever for now, it's a drag, but you can oftentimes win that customer back. But if you if you put a 6-month hold on their windows or doors or whatever, guess what? They're never using you in anytime soon. So a lot of
Who
it
said
is,
this to you, Mark?
oh, I used to work at Marvin. I shouldn't probably use their name, and then I've talked to other, because I worked at Marvin, I would meet somebody at other manufacturers or whatever, and we just discuss about, because when I left there, the labor shortage was just insane. I mean, they just could not find anybody, and they were so far behind, and their biggest fear was losing customers permanently. So the price, it's there. The other thing that was interesting, I worked with the guy who set the prices. He was like right next to me. We were kind of buddies. So I got there's a lot that goes into pricing that, we have no idea. I mean, there's just tons. That's all he did is consider the ramifications of where prices should be, how they should go up or down. I mean, they have a whole department there to just work
that's
on
either
that.
how you make money or not, right? Is
Right.
how you price something is everything.
Yep.
Yeah,
One
I
of the things-
found that with, like windows, we've priced several different window manufacturers and their like products across their lines, and they come in just like within a few dollars of each other. It's really amazing. Like there is no money to be saved when you go from Marvin's high-end product to another one's high-end product, and it's pretty surprising.
Yeah, it's all, and when you're talking high-end products, it's all about it's a lot has to do with the relationship. And the best way to ruin a relationship is to not deliver something.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a killer. And it's not just, it's every manufacturer is having this problem.
One of the things that I found really interesting in one of the emails you forwarded to me from your electrician, Ian, was he said, everything electrical, like I'm sure all trades are experiencing, is all over the board. Copper has seen the highest increase, which unfortunately is what makes electricity work. While copper is high, I am told that the plastic sheathing around cable is where the real problem is. Most or all of the plastic refineries that make all sorts of products are in Texas. So with Texas's hurricanes, winter storms, and COVID, it has greatly reduced the production and in turn access to product. Who could guess we'd have a plastic shortage in America? It blows my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes you think of the old George Carlin bit about maybe the whole point of humans on Earth is because the Earth wanted plastic for itself and didn't know how to make it. And then eventually the Earth will phase us out into a new paradigm of Earth plus plastic.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Ian, I think you mentioned earlier that you used low voltage for all your lighting. Was that true?
No, not low voltage. We just did, they're all LED displays.
But they're all wired with whatever, 120 to all.
Yeah, they're all wired with 110. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if there's any money to be saved by pulling, low voltage wires.
One of the things your electrician also said is that generator orders are 9 to 12 months out.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting is, like yesterday, I got a Generac circular in my mailbox. Like, why are dealers still advertising if they can't get the generators? I don't understand.
It's pretty strange. And Generac is located in Wisconsin. Kohler's located in Wisconsin. So that was one that really surprised me, that like this guy is telling us he can't get material that's literally made, within an hour drive of where his shop is, and he can't get it.
One of the things I heard was that, when California had their wildfires and PG&E shut down all the grid, right? And then Texas had its winter storm, that generator sales were off the hook for folks who just couldn't or wouldn't be without power. And it makes sense to me.
Yeah, we partnered with Champion Generator for the FHB house build for our house. And I think the first maybe 2 or 3 generators that we were supposed to get from Champion all ended up in Texas. So it was, we would get a ship and delivery day. I'd get my electrician going, and then nothing would happen. And I'd talk to the rep, and he'd say, yeah, that one went to Texas.
Did you do propane or gas?
We have propane, yeah. With my wife being a chef, we had to have a gas stove, and we don't have natural gas.
Have you had to use yours,
here.
Patrick?
My generator?
Yeah, have you had to use it yet?
No, so I have a portable, not a standby, but
Right.
I bought it in a similar time frame. And no, of course, I haven't had to use it because I spent like $2,500 to get that thing. If
Yeah, if you
that's
guarantee.
fine. If it
Yeah.
guarantees I never lose my power again, that was probably
That's
a safe
worth it.
investment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you had to use your generator, Ian?
No, we had some really bad windstorms this week, so I did go out and ran the test cycle on it, and just for peace of mind, made sure that it was all at the ready to go, and then we didn't lose power. But my dad likes to joke that since they put an old-fashioned transformer for us out on a pole on the road, he said, "Oh, it's a good thing you got that generator, because somebody with a tractor or a snowplow is going to hit that pole someday and knock your power out for a few days."
Yeah. So you have an underground service and your transformer is in a box, I presume, by the side of the road. And that's what he's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, it's up on the pole. It's the old school,
Yeah.
like in the Northeast style. The utility guy actually asked me which kind I wanted, and I, in Patrick speak, I went, "Well, which one's cheaper?"
Yeah.
I'll take that one.
You don't have to pay for that, though, right? That's up to the utility. Am I wrong about that?
I think I ended up paying like maybe $1,900 for them to put in the transformer, the pole, and run the wire to my house. And I don't remember what the formula was, but there was like, you pay X percent of this part of the job and X percent of this part. And that's just what it ended up being for me. And I think they include 250 feet of cable. So anything more than 250 feet from the source, you're on the hook for all of it. And that's where some of these homes out here on larger lots can really get expensive, when someone wants their couple 100-foot driveway and not thinking that you've got to run that amount of footage of electrical service from the road.
Yeah, all our transformers are above ground here as well. It's just, and there's just telephone poles everywhere here, and coming from working a lot in newer suburbs in the Twin Cities area, everything's underground, which makes sense. They're not, no wind, no ice storms. But here, that's not the case, partly because everything's so spread out. And I think maybe it has to do with, the bedrock is quite high in a lot of places, right near the surface. So digging is just not really an option.
It has everything to do with cost, as everything always does, right? It's way cheaper to run overhead power than underground.
Yep.
Yeah, and the material end, another interesting thing I got from our HVAC supplier was that he was notified by NIBCO that they are reducing their allocation of parts to the Midwest by 50%.
What's
starting
NIBCO?
next year. I think NIBCO is a company that makes a lot of valves and a lot of plumbing parts. I think they make those.
Oh yeah, copper fittings. I remember NIBCO.
And
yeah,
valves and stuff like that. So they do a lot of boiler work, a lot of radiant heat baseboard. They have a plumbing division now, so I can't imagine what that does to his business to have to fight for that material.
Can we go back again? They just arbitrarily decided the Midwest was where they were going to stop distribution?
Screw the people in the Midwest.
Yeah. I'm sure that they have a guy like the one that sat next to Marvin, and was like, okay, well, we get money from here, we get money from there. Yeah. That's the lower area, so you get screwed.
Wow. My opinion of American business is challenged, let's just say. Who else did you hear from, Ian?
So I also heard
your
from
painter, right?
Our painter, yep. Who he's a really interesting guy, and always has an interesting take on stuff. And one of his things that he said, so few people applied for any of the jobs that he put out, and the ones that did were generally unskilled but wanted premium pay. Which I thought was a really good way to put it. And we found a little bit of that when we've tried to hire this year, but for the most part, we've been able to find younger people who were recent grads of a tech school program to keep ourselves staffed. But I know that he's been eating a lot of the Sherwin-Williams increases and other paint company increases.
I found that interesting. He said, in order to remain competitive, we've just been absorbing the costs because people are not willing to pay more for painting because I guess they don't see the value in it, which is troubling to me. But
well, it's easy enough to do themselves. There's not a lot of equipment costs involved.
Right.
Ian, are your clients painting their own homes? I can't imagine they are.
No, our clients are not. But what we find, especially on the painting and drywall end, there's such a wide range of prices that you get from different people. It can make my job of estimating a project pretty difficult when you're looking at 3 or 4 painting contractors that you're trying to divide your work out between. And it's really hard to predict what each project is going to cost. So I assume it has a lot to do with their labor burden and pricing.
As an example, drywall, it's the same companies make all the drywall, the same companies that make the tape and the compound. I'm sure labor costs are pretty comparable. So what's the difference between 2 bids from 2 different drywall contractors? Have you been able to discern what they're doing differently?
Yeah, I haven't. I think it's probably the scale at which they do their work. And one of our drywall contractors has told me several times that his biggest thing is that he wants to take care of the handful of builders that he works for. And what he's had to do over the last couple of years is when just a regular homeowner calls him up and wants him to come and drywall their basement, he's got to turn them down. And that changes the way the market views the value of a product. I think in some ways it probably makes them a little bit more expensive and makes the market rate of doing drywall go up.
It seems, what I've noticed about getting bids, seems like drywall is pretty standard and consistent because it's X amount of cents per feet per, whether it's the lid or the walls or whatever. But painting, I think painting might have to do with because I've found that too, a wide variety of painting. And I think it might have to do with the contractor's preference. If it's a lot of painting doors and trim, they're just and they don't like doing it, they're gonna say, heck with that, I'm just gonna charge more for this. Or if it's just rolling walls, and some guys like, doing, I think it depends on the job. I think their costs depend on the job more, where drywall,
variation in painting makes more sense to me because, the paint you choose, you can buy paint that's $30 a gallon, or you can buy paint that's $100 a gallon. You can spray an entire house all the same color in hours, right? Versus if you're have a lot of complexity, so.
Yep. Yeah, one of the things that I learned working with Mike DeBlasi, who I think DeBlasi Painting's done some stuff with you for the magazine, right, Patrick?
Yes.
Was so much of the cost of painting is in the prep work. So if your prep work is of a higher level than another guy's, you're going to be more expensive, and that's sometimes hard to justify to a homeowner, but I would think it'd be easier to justify to a builder who has to be the one to put their name on the job at the end of it
and fix the peeling paint that
Yeah, it's all about the prep. Absolutely.
Well, I don't see this getting any better, right? I mean, there's no expectation that prices are going to stabilize, is what I've read.
No, nobody does. And when you talk to other builders, even here in the Midwest, just the amount of backlog that we all have, booking projects in 2023 and telling new clients it might be 2024 and having them say, well, put us on the list, is just really surprising. And
that never happened, right?
Yeah, it's something that I never expected moving back here.
I think the high end markets never seem to be affected as much as like the median home price is. So, but at some point, the correction is going to happen on the supply side or on the demand side, because people they're not going to be able to afford these houses. They're just going to be too expensive.
But we have a new paradigm. COVID has changed everything. People are all about nesting. They're about working from home. They're about spending money on their house instead of a vacation. I don't think we have anything that we can look to the past as a model for the future.
Yeah,
true. And I think that makes it. Yeah, go ahead.
When I built this house, I never thought it would have appraised at what it appraised at. I mean, it didn't even cross my mind that it would be, what it is, what it turned out to be.
There's a lot of people, the working at home thing definitely caused a glut. People wanted their houses improved, but I think that's a finite change. But there's still a lot of people who work at factories, construction guys that got to go to the job site. Those people, a good portion of our workforce do not have the option of working at home, and they need somewhere to live.
But the thing is, like, the Great Resignation, it defies all logic. These are people who have gainful employment but decide that they need more out of life owing to our recent situation, and they're willing to either not work or take a pay cut, or it's unparalleled.
Downsize their own personal overhead in a way that lets them do something that maybe they would rather do that pays less, whereas in times past you'd have to take that better job with that little bit more money, and just doesn't seem to be that way anymore.
Strange times. It's all with the cost increases and the labor shortages. I'm envisioning me in about 3 months, like having my bedroom in my living room next to the wood stove and cooking hot dogs on the wood stove. It's just not looking good.
Yeah. I keep thinking that, things are going to get back to normal in a month or two, or it's like we're on our way. It's like it doesn't seem to be, unfortunately, ending.
No, and inflation, it's like a snowball. It builds. It just seems to build on itself.
One thing I heard that's interesting was that inflation is largely human perception. Like when you think things are going to be more expensive even further down the road, you exacerbate the current inflation because you decide you need this thing that's going to be more expensive.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and that's why economics isn't a math thing. It's a social science. People think that econ is all about numbers. No, it's about human behavior, because our whole economy is based on perception.
It's true. We all have to believe that the money has got value, and it all comes down to that.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, this was a good conversation, gentlemen. I'm worried we're going to have to live up to this ongoing. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Jeff, Mark, and Ian for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Thanks very much for listening.